One of the most dreadful and frustrating parts of the horrific school shooting that took place in Parkland, Florida last year was the role played by a police deputy called Scott Peterson. Peterson was armed and right on the scene, but because of cowardice, stayed where he was and refused to go inside and confront the shooter. Despite this, clearly a dereliction of duty, Peterson was not fired. He now draws over $100,000 a year in a pension. Now we have a hint as to why. Correspondent Matt Finn is Fox's expert on Parkland. He covered extensively for us last year. He joins us tonight. Matt, good to see you.
Tucker, this week the Stoneman-Douglas Commission released a scathing 450-page report. The investigators on that commission interviewed hundreds of people and poured over massive amounts of evidence and determined that school resource officer Scott Peterson's response was, quote, abysmal, and that law enforcement's response overall was a failure, and that the massacre would not have happened if the shooter, Nicholas Cruz's mental health issues were adequately addressed. Also this week, the latest in a series of reports questioning how disgraced Parkland School Resource Officer Scott Peterson was able to retire with full benefits, a six-figure salary, even though he was caught on tape standing by outside instead of rushing into the Parkland school to stop the shooter from murdering more students. A 2014 school incident report filed by that school resource officer, Scott Peterson, might hold the answer. The report indicates Peterson's boss, Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel, had a son who was a student at Stoneman-Douglas, and according to the incident report, assisted in battery and perhaps sexual assault against a fellow student. Peterson called for the sheriff's son to be suspended instead of referring him for criminal prosecution, perhaps a favor Sheriff Scott Israel never forgot. The parents of that student that was assaulted later said they were okay with without law enforcement action because they felt it would have caused trauma to their son. Sheriff's Israel office confirmed that it received our request for a comment on the story. We did not hear back. Next week, Governor-elect Ron DeSantis will be sworn into office, and he has already indicated that he is considering suspending Sheriff Scott Israel. Tucker.
Long overdue. Matt Finn for us, thank you very much. Jeff Bell is the president of the Broward County Sheriff's Office Deputies Association. He joins us tonight. Mr. Bell, thank you very much for coming on. So the last part of Matt Finn's report, also corroborated by a long piece this morning, a great piece in Real Clear Politics, that suggests that there's at least an appearance of quid pro quo between Sheriff Israel and this Deputy Peterson. It's corrupt, if true. Do you believe that that's what happened?
There's absolutely the appearance that there were some improprieties of how that case was handled. All day, every day, the report that was made is absolutely a felony that is alleged to have happened to that victim. And Deputy Peterson took that report, which he should have, and he did complete an offense report. But in the body of the report, he described the felony as a misdemeanor to justify it to fit under the Promise Program, which would allow the sheriff's son to skate any type of criminal prosecution or severe punishment, and it was allowed to be referred into the Promise Program, where he was then issued a 3-day school suspension instead of having a felony on his record, which should have been the outcome of that case.
Peterson's behavior, whatever the truth of what we're just talking about, Peterson's behavior on the scene of the shooting that day is especially infuriating to the law enforcement officers I know personally, because it's such a perversion of the duty of a law enforcement officer, which is to protect the public with courage if necessary. Do you think it's odd that he wasn't fired for that?
Tucker, what we see from within the Broward Sheriff's Office is completely different from what the average person on the outside sees looking into our office. We, as the employees, realize that there are numerous problems within the Sheriff's Office that encourage bad behavior by the command staff and encourage the behavior by the people inside the school, the juveniles, are getting away with arrests. And it almost seems like the deputies are being punished more for their actions than what the criminals get through the juvenile justice system. And this is why we've made recommendations to the governor that we need to start getting tough on juvenile crime, because in theory, the Promise Program, it keeps kids out of prison. But in reality, what we're doing is we're not arresting these juveniles. We're not showing them that there's consequences for their actions. And we're actually creating a pipeline for these kids to go into prison instead of staying out of prison, because we're not showing them that there's consequences for their actions.
Well, what about the other kids who just want to go to school and maybe learn something, go to college? I mean, what's their experience like going to school with kids who are out of control?
Well, Tucker, those are the true victims in this, just with the school program. Because you continually have a small percentage of kids that go to school that on a daily basis they disrupt the school system. Good teachers cannot teach in their classroom because they're constantly spending 90% of their time with a 3% of the population side of the school.
Right.
And if they cannot refer those kids to law enforcement because they're forbidden to tell the police officers on campus if there's a crime or not, and then the school administrator gets to make the decision whether or not to make that report to the police officer. And then if they do, you have to take it a step further, where each child is allowed 4 criminal offenses per school year before we are allowed as deputies to actually act on reasonable suspicion and probable cause. And that is the main root of the problem with the public school system today, is that we have school administrators dictating to deputies, law enforcement officers, what reasonable suspicion and probable cause is. We need to remove the politics out of law enforcement and let the law enforcement personnel do their jobs to keep our kids safe. Otherwise, we're going to see this tragedy again and again and again.
I suspect Scott Israel is not helping. Thank you very much, Mr. Bell. It's great to see you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, America's borders remain open tonight. Its middle class is in decline. Its military is gravely overstretched. Meanwhile, the media, they're on top of it. They're asking Nancy Pelosi which ice cream she prefers. We have the tape. You'll want to stay for it.